Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Jenny's always going to be the loudest because I complain that we say Shabbat Shalom and people don't respond with full voice. They're like, Shabbat Shalom. So Jenny has taken on the responsibility in the community to be as robust a Shabbat Shalom in response as possible. But I wouldn't notice her so much if everyone else did it in that kind of way. So that's the goal eventually, that we all have such a feeling of Shabbat Shalom that we greet each other in that way. Shabbat Shalom. There you go. Now I didn't even hear Jenny that time. In this double Parashat, Tazri, a-Metzora, verses and verses are devoted to bodily emissions and skin disease, blood in childbirth, and the rituals with birds and hyssop, amongst many other things that are used to purify a person who wants to become ritually pure in order to return to the camp. For hundreds of years, B'nai Mitzvah kids have struggled to find the sacred amidst all the fluid and the flakes. Itamar has done a beautiful job in finding meaning amidst all these details. Few parshiot feel as antiquated or irrelevant. But for the rabbis of old, and I guess these rabbis too, not one word of the Torah was to be taken for granted, not one. Each and every one was divine and therefore endowed with meaning and purpose. And so these parshiot, dominated by the concerns of ritual purity and impurity, which are regulated by the priests, are transformed into questions of moral and ethical purity and impurity for the rabbis. As it turns out, these issues are far from irrelevant and inconsequential for our times. In Parashat a-Metzora, it says, God spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, Ki tavo el eretz Canaan, asher ani noten lachem la'achuza, v'natati negat za'ara'at, bevet eretz achuzatchem. When you enter the land of Canaan that I give you as a possession, and I inflict an eruptive plague upon a house in the land you possess, uva asher lo habayit v'higid lakohen lemor kenega nir'eh li babayit. The owner of the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, something like a plague has appeared in my house. The plague in the owner's house in many ways is understood as the symbolic collapse of moral order. And I don't think I'm alone in believing something like a plague is appearing not only in our houses, but in our institutions, in our law firms, in our universities, and for good reason. You'd need several glasses of wine at the Pesach Seder to name all the plagues of our time and take them out with your finger from the cup of wine. I know each one of us has a different hierarchy of what is the most concerning or infuriating. For some, the significant rise in anti-Semitism dominates the list. For others, the use of anti-Semitism for pernicious ends feels more concerning. Some think the external threats against Israel take precedent. For others, the internal threats feel more existential. In our own country, the economy is in chaos, people are being disappeared, free speech is under attack, and the rule of law is being undermined. Our democracy is at risk. So what's a Jew to do? And what's a shul to do? Midrash Tanchuma offers 11 reasons for the infiltration of the plague of tzara'at. All of them are ethical or moral. 1, for idolatry. 2, for desecration of God's name. 3, for unchastity. 4, for theft. 5, for slander. 6, for false witness. 7, upon the judge who perverts justice. 8, for swearing in vain. 9, upon one who enters a domain which is not his. 10, upon one who thinks false thoughts. and 11 upon one who instigates quarrels amongst brothers. And some also say, for the evil eye, for being miserly. Kli Yakar, another commentary, adds an additional component. He teaches that the main reason Sara'at arrives in the house is because of the owner's stinginess. He has made the house exclusively for himself. The Kli Yakar says, when we are blessed with abundance, or even when we have just enough, we are not meant to see our possessions as ours alone, but as gifts from God. Therefore, when we share them, our giving, according to the Kli Yakar, is giving from the divine table. He continues, therefore, it is only logical that he should give of his possessions to the poor of his people. And if he does not, I shall put the eruption of Tzara'at in the house of the land of your possession. Among the reasons Tzara'at appears, most don't fit into neat categories. Some are considered major sins, some are minor. Some are sins ben adam lechavero, between people, while others are sins ben adam lamakom, between a person and God. Some in the public realm, others in the private. And some aren't like literally significant prohibitions at all, like instigating a quarrel or not being stingy. The list is not nearly exhaustive, yet I think it hints at so many pathways for individual and societal breakdowns. While tzara'at affects the body, the clothing, and houses, their external manifestations, Rolly said this last night too, because this is the essence of how these parshiot are understood, are expressions of the moral and ethical and spiritual decay of the soul for the rabbis. Long after the skin afflictions that are described in this parasha were relevant, the questions that concern our soul, our moral compass, and collective justice, dignity, and compassion within society are still of primary importance to spiritual life. There is no category of living that religious life does not make a claim on. There is no Jewish life that is truly lived if it only exists in the sanctuary or in the ritual realm. Jewish life stakes a claim on our whole being and asks us, V'asita hayashar v'atov b'nei Adonai lema'an yitev lach. Do what is right and good in the sight of God, that it may go well with you, as is stated in the book of Devarim. Ramban and Rambam offer two different ways of thinking about what it means to do what is right and good in the eyes of God, and I'd like to share them with you this morning. First, Ramban believes that doing good will, of course, yield God's blessing, which is what the verse says, that it may good be well with you. If you do good, then you'll get good, essentially. Midah keneged midah, in the best sense of the word, that measure for measure. If you do good, you'll receive good. But he asks, what does it really mean to do what is right and good? And he says, acting beyond the strict demands of the law. It's a principle in the rabbinic tradition called lifnin mishurat hadin, to go beyond the letter of the law. And the intention of this is that from the beginning God said to keep God's commandments, testimonies, and laws. And now it says, even regarding what God did not command, pay attention to do what is good and right in God's eyes. Ramban acknowledges that it is impossible for the Torah or the laws that followed from the Torah to delineate and adjudicate every situation. Therefore, we need to discern in all that is not commanded the righteous behavior in every situation and act beyond the strict demands of the law, which means the law is not enough. It doesn't cover all the territory, and in the spaces that are not explained of how we should behave, we should be driving our intuition, our moral intuition, by the question to do what is right and good in the eyes of God, not to essentially exempt ourselves because the law doesn't say this is how you should behave here. Rambam has a different perspective on what it means to go beyond the strict demands of the law. And he quotes in his Mishnah Torah in the laws of slaves 9:8. He says, Mutar la'avod be'eved Kanaani v'farech. It is permissible to have a Canaanite slave performing excruciating labor. It is permissible, according to the law, to have a Canaanite slave perform excruciating labor. I just want you to hear the word varech is actually the same word used, the hard labor that the Israelites performed in Mitzrayim in Egypt. He continues, although this is the law, the attribute of piety and the way of wisdom is for a person to be merciful and to pursue justice, not to make his slaves carry a heavy yoke, nor cause them distress. He should allow them to partake of all the food and drink he serves. He says, cruelty and arrogance are found among only idol-worshipping Gentiles. By contrast, Jews, whom the Holy Blessed One granted the goodness of the Torah and commanded to observe righteous statutes and judgments, are merciful to all. Halavai, I wish that were the case. The Rambam teaches that law is not by definition merciful, right? By him saying and acknowledging that we can treat the Canaanite slave cruelly. That's the law. But he says that's not how we should behave. That being a Jew is someone who embodies the mercy of God. The rachamim of God is our job. To be God's divine image in the world is to be with rachamim, to be with mercy, which sometimes by his teaching means upending the law or saying the law isn't good enough. It's not merciful enough. It's not compassionate enough. It's not generous enough. What is permissible in the law, treating a slave poorly, is cruel and arrogant. And in fact, it's its own form of idolatry. And therefore, our Judaism and even our God demand something else from us. So what is a Jew to do, and what is a shul to do in these times? First, I think we need to ask the question. We need to be willing to ask the question, what is good and right in the eyes of God? Even if we're on the defense, even if we're being attacked, even if we have an alignment with different issues, it doesn't mean we can desist from the question, what is good and righteous in the eyes of God? For the Rambam, that means we must not only follow what is prescribed and lawful and right, but to go beyond the letter of the law and examine the spaces in between, spaces that emerge when we walk on the street or talk to someone we disagree with, or consider how to participate in our democracy, or how true support for the people in the land of Israel actually should manifest itself. For Ramban, every space is religious space. Therefore, we must always seek out what is good and right in the eyes of God. For Rambam, doing what is right and good in the eyes of God sometimes require us to say that the law is not good enough, to protest the law, to upend the law, to prioritize mercy for humanity above our own self-interest, to not only see the humanity in another person, but to refrain from denigrating the humanity and God's image in ourselves. There's a famous pasuk in the book of Tehillim, in the book of Psalms, Et lasot ladonai hefiro toratecha. It is time to act for God because they have violated your Torah. Rabbi Natan rereads the verse. It says, Rabbi Natan omer, Hefiru Toratecha et lasot ladonai. They should violate your Torah because it is time to act for God. We are living in profoundly challenging times. Israel this week was literally on fire. It is sustaining a brutal war and 59 hostages remain in Gaza. 24, please God, are still alive. There is little faith in this racist and narcissistic government. Vicious mobs attacked Beit Samueli synagogue on Yom HaZikaron, the synagogue of our beloved friend, Rabbi Chen ben Or Tzvoni, as they watched the joint Israeli-Palestinian memorial ceremony. We were sitting here in the sanctuary watching the ceremony, while in Ra'anana, there was a mob that entered her synagogue, throwing stones, yelling heinous things, and scaring them in incredible ways. I spoke to Chen that night through text, and when I spoke to her the following morning, she said that as she left the shul and walked through the mob of rioters, these are her words, not mine, she felt like she was in the scene when she saw the hostages being released from Gaza. The sense of the mob around her and not knowing where to turn. And right here in our own country, so much is unraveling. Children, 2 years old, 4 years old, are being deported, some with cancer and without their medicine. A Turkish graduate student from my alma mater, Tufts University, was disappeared off the streets for writing an op-ed against the war in Gaza. Medicaid and food stamps are at risk. Millions of dollars, billions of dollars for research for cancer, amongst so many other diseases, is being pulled. Thousands and upon thousands of federal workers have lost their jobs. Actually, a colleague of mine in DC, who is an Orthodox rabbi at an Orthodox synagogue, said 20% of his synagogue's membership has lost their job. There is no doubt that many of us disagree over what policies are needed to rectify these significant and weighty problems before us. Many of our differences of opinion come from our lived experiences, our families of origins and their stories, how we are built psychologically, our hierarchy of values, and what we fear most. But a religious life, a spiritual life, in what is one that is not cordoned off to the synagogue or to our prayers. It is political, because religious life is about not only what's on the inside, but doing right, what is right and good on the outside, which involves moving power to do what is compassionate and good for humanity. V'asita hayashar v'hatov b'nei Adonai lema'an yitev lach. Do what is right and good in the sight of God, that it may go well with you. These words are both a guide and a demand. Religious life is not meant to be merely a balm and a refuge against the plagues of the world, although we need it to be. Religious life helps us discern our role and bolster us to rise to the divine expectation, especially and most importantly in a world that is as plagued as ours. Shabbat Shalom.